So, Kristin, why don't you just do a quick hello to everybody, introduce yourself, and of course, especially where they can find your website and other information.
Sure. Okay. So I'm Kristin Geeslin, the Mindful Seer, and I am a psychic medium, but I also had a 3-decade career working in nonprofit organizations, doing everything from entry-level counseling to director level. So I understand what it means to be part of a collaborative team. Some psychic mediums get into this kind of work doing one-on-one consultations earlier in their life, and they don't have that same variety of experience that I do bring. What happened with those young ladies at your place was, though, sort of a combination of a lot of different magic that I feel comes out of our ability to hold sacred space, to be present in the now moment.
And I like that you call it a safe space, because that's what we always want Phantom History House to be. We talk about that all the time.
Take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, where people are comfortable to embrace their psychic side or tell their ghost story or whatever it might be. I love that.
So what happened with those girls was, a combination of us. Okay, it sort of is exemplary of what we're talking about, groups. Okay, because we work together as a group, the Kristin, Steve, Tim, team, that opportunity kind of was there, but it wasn't completely formed. And because we have some trust and intentional direction, because we had sat in that very room only weeks before that happened and said, wouldn't it be cool to have groups of people here and do healing kinds of activities, or things that build positive energy in groups? And poof, it was the very, very last minute of the night that, the young ladies came in, and it was really time for me to stop doing readings. And I think it was Steve's idea to do them as a group.
Well, I don't think it was planned to have.
No,
I think
no,
what
not
happened,
at all.
The girls sort of started coming over. They were checking out the house. They knew that we were doing readings, or whatever. And we thought there were just going to be maybe a couple of them, and maybe they would do a reading or whatever. But of course, Kristin, as you know, there ended up being I think the whole girls softball team, there were 12 or 15 of them?
Yeah, teenage girls travel in packs.
Completely unexpected, but it's so cool, Kristin, like you're saying, we had sort of put this intention out there, all right, universe, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this thing where we get groups of people together, and then this thing just sort of happened. Mm-hmm. But the real trick, Kristin, was you worked your magic. You have a way of realizing who's sitting in front of you and exactly how to approach them, the right words to use, and you made them feel safe and comfortable. Can you explain about that part?
Yeah, sometimes that's like a mystery to me too. Okay, I mean, I know that as a meditator, okay, because I have a long history of meditation and holding sacred space. I've been holding sacred space or healing space for people for 40 years. My first professional work doing counseling and guidance, I was 20 years old. So when it's time for me to be present for others, I naturally sort of shift in consciousness to a slightly different brainwave state. I'm not like chatty Kristin here talking to Tim and Steve and all these people. The energy that I'm holding in my whatever we'll say auric field is a little bit different, and I think people they can feel that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Listen, everybody, we're talking about group readings and the dynamics of that with psychic medium Kristin Geeslin. If you let us know where you're watching from, please comment in. And we're hoping that different groups of people, whether a group of friends, family, co-workers, an office group, team building for that kind of thing, whatever your organization is, we're hoping that you will come consider doing this kind of thing at Phantom History House. So that's my little commercial moment. So, Kristin, you had the girls sit down, and then you used the Voyager Tarot they each chose a card. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, well, what happened, fortunately, is one of the girls had my signature B'ism reading, okay, where I go through 5 frequencies: the physical, body, emotional, intellectual life, spirit, soul, and mastermind, which is your connection with higher power. And okay, so all these girls come in, they sit down, the circle is formed, we're in front of the fire, the moment is set. And I'm thinking, okay, we can't do a whole bunch of different questions because it was really time to be wrapping up the evening. And one of the girls, okay, so here's the thing. Somehow that girl, one of the girls, felt comfortable giving an idea. Okay, she shared, hey, why don't we do one of the letters? And I'm thinking, oh, let's do emotions, because of course, what is the main challenge of teenage girls? Managing themselves emotionally, of course, right? So that's how, it started like one thing into the next, into the next. So then the girls, the magic really began when the girls started reading for or coaching each other. So we decided, yes, we're going to pull a card and we're going to ask the baking bowl of belief, which I have here, which I put all of my cards, including the Voyager Tarot. I use 3 decks by James Wanless. I use the Voyager Tarot, which is a tarot card for the 21st century. Okay, it is, this is the synthesis card, okay, which is where we really are now, synthesizing lots of different things. Then there's also this card, these cards. This is the Sustain Yourself deck, which I like to use. And then I have the White Squirrel deck. Oh, look, the Collaborate card is coming out. How appropriate. Okay, so I use this baking bowl with 3 different decks in it, and I call it the baking bowl of belief, because everything that we're manifesting in some way is related to what we believe is possible. Okay, so back to the girls. So the first girl to my left pulls out the Priestess card. And the Priestess card is all about balance and keeping your act together, staying cool under pressure, being objective. She's got objectivity. So I asked that young woman, I said, well, what do you do? What do you do if you start to lose your cool? And, like at a game or a practice or whatever. So I used, some content that, they had already revealed to me that they were, a softball team. And she said, oh, well, I don't do anything, kind of disparaging herself. And the girl sitting next to her said, that's not true. Don't you know, when you get upset at practice, you go walk it off. So, that's what was so cool, is that, her teammate knew her well enough to give her those words of encouragement and remind her that, yes, indeed, she does have a way that she gets herself back together when she's not feeling regulated. She does have a thing that she does. And it just went around the circle like that.
And I remember that night so clearly, because we were all just kind of looking at each other going, wow, this is so cool that this is happening. My question for you, Kristin, is, what happens like on an energy level, a psychic level, whatever it might be, when there's a group of people in a space like that? Is there some kind of shift that people like you who are very intuitive kind of feel or see? How do you describe that environment?
Oh yeah, it to a large extent, of course, it's going to be, what do those people bring into the game, And I think those girls were just in a really open moment. What was happening was really spontaneous. And they were, it was a party, it was a birthday party, and they were there with their teammates. So they were in a pretty up space. And depending on what's going on with a group, I'm going to be aware. I'm going to usually ask some questions to find out what's happening with that group. But in this particular case, it was sort of like just, everything just sort of unfolded in a serendipitous way. Probably any future things that we did, we might want to ask any groups that would come, whether that be a family group, a service organization, a club, kind of what's going on with their group, and maybe ask them to have a little bit of direction. I could foster a little direction for what they'd like to get out of the experience, depending on how closely if they're there for fun, or if they're maybe a collaborative work group that needs to understand more about each other to be productive. I would ask the bold different questions.
Well, and you might not focus on the emotion part of the Bee-ism, because that was very vulnerable. But for those girls, like I said, it worked. I remember it worked so well. And you're right. As they went around the circle, they were talking to each other. Well, remember, you do this, and positives and negatives, sort of calling each other out. But it was all from a place of, I like you, I support you. That was very clear.
Yeah, I remember that very clearly as well. And it was cool to kind of see it from a team building standpoint. So another question I would have for you, Kristin, is, in the business world, for example, could something like this work in that setting where it's not, a birthday party or softball team, where it's, more of like a businessy corporate kind of thing? Is this the type of team building that environment could use?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, James Wanless, who created the deck, wrote this book right here, focusing on that application. Okay, so this is Strategic Intuition for the 21st Century, Tarot for Business is the name of this book that he wrote about how to use his deck for that application. And, sometimes you've got to, in a business environment, there's usually some kind of a goal that you're trying to achieve. But, there may be 10 different ways to get there, or people may not even have ideas about how they're going to get there. So, when you use the cards, you can it kind of shakes you out of your typical ways of thinking and can help you think more creatively, more outside the box. And to even get out of, like, even myself, I was pretty creative already, but when I started working with the Voyager Tarot, I started seeing things more in terms of patterns and flows, and not so much in labeled or black and white or boxy kinds of definitions. And it just helped me kind of be more patient, I think, and more able to sort of see opportunities as they were arising, like this. Okay. And it's hard to even completely describe like what happened to me personally with this particular deck, but it helped me be more flexible in my thinking. And I think it can really do that for groups, to help them, look at things in different ways. And of course, I'm certain that those young women have an excellent coach, because yes, that foundation of respect for each other was apparent in how they treated each other and talked to each other. But that is also something that I seem to bring to groups, is a degree of, this is an environment where we are always respectful. And when I do group activities in even a Zoom interface, I create a pretty high level of safety and security. And frankly, I don't really know how I do that. It just is there.
Yeah. And I love that phrase, being more flexible in your thinking. I think everybody needs to have that ability.
Yeah, because right now our world is changing so fast. A few decades ago, like in the 60s or 70s or something, Alvin Toffler wrote this book called Future Shock. Well, we're in future shock now, which means the rate of change is increasing exponentially. So that means that we have to, we have to do more pivoting, more learning, more adjusting, less being attached to how we thought it was going to be, and going with the flow and seeing what the new opportunities are. So, everyone can benefit from that. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's so interesting the way you just framed that. But I feel like so many people, it seems, around me in our society are so unequipped to do this, sort of handle this level of change and sort of keep up. And I think that's why people are sort of panicked, and there's a sense of despair, like it seems out of control to people, and they're trying to figure out some way to hold on and gain that control. But I don't think they always make good choices and where they're hanging on, So I love that the kinds of group activities we're talking about. I would love that people would come and do that at Phantom History House with whatever their group is. I feel like that would be very powerful and helpful.
Empowering. I mean, the bottom line for me in all of the intuitive work that I do, and in all of the work from ground zero, from when I was 20 years old, for me, it's about empowerment. I've never wanted to be like the wizard. I'm the one who pulls the screen back and says, hey, here's how the levers work. Okay, that's what makes it interesting for me, is to be able to show other people how they can access their own intuitive ability, to access their own creativity, to get at some of the subconscious material that may be blocking, those positive adaptations.
And I like, again, how you phrase that too. And I think, in my experience, limited as it is, dealing with psychics and mediums and tarot readers and things like that, is whenever their client kind of has this self-realization of like, oh, I can do X, Y, Z, and the conversation I had with this person across the table from me helped me realize that. And I think that's a misconception a lot of people have about what people like you do. You know, you're not a fortune teller, you're not telling the future per se, but you're letting people kind of see themselves as they need to be seen.
Yes, exactly. To see maybe more or to see differently, to see in new and different ways. And that's very powerful. And that's partly why I call myself the mindful seer, because it is about how we tell the stories of our lives, how we the words that we use are very important, and what we see in our imagination is also creative. What we hold in consciousness, the more time we spend with that, the more likely it is to come into this 3D experience. So what we are putting in our heads and using our words for is something we want to choose and be mindful of.
Yeah, I love that a lot. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about what we're talking about, having group readings, where your chair is making a lot of noise. Everybody's chair is making a lot of
I'm
noise.
sitting in an antique chair, and I don't know if it's going to hold
Yeah,
out.
I'm a little worried. I just had this one fixed, and clearly I should not have put the 230-pound bodybuilder in it tonight. But anyway,
try not to move too much.
Yeah, so if you hear the squeaking sounds, I thought I should say something. Anyway, what I love about this, Kristin, is I love the idea of having groups of all kinds, right? Whether they're friends, family, a corporate group, an office group, whatever, a volunteer group that gets together. You said something to me earlier about the hard sort of forces the truth to come out. I think what's interesting to me is it's taking people outside of all the typical modalities that they know and use, right? Like we're not sitting in a room and brainstorming and writing things on a whiteboard or whatever. Like we're taking a whole nother circuitous route around over here through the psyche, right? Which I think is so interesting. So is that not a big part of how this would be so helpful, is that it's really something completely different for most people?
I think it's true. I think it is something different for most people, especially applied in a business application. I mean, probably a lot of women have had a reading at some point, but not that many guys. And actually, in preparation for tonight, I looked up, who's doing what with intuition. And there were a couple of men that have written books recently, and was actually a training in the state of Florida recently, on intuition at work. And guys often relate with their intuition through their guts. They know about the gut feeling, and that's valid and valuable. But I will say that James Wanless transcends the typical guy's view of intuition, because he's really studied enough spirituality that he also embraces the divine feminine. And then, this whole entire deck, this green, sustain yourself deck, is what we need for the future. Okay, so look, we've got this volcanic fire here. And this, to me, the volcanic fire card coming out speaks about the importance now we have of bringing our whole global experience back into better harmony with the earth. That we've had so much focus on production and making stuff that we have made our nature less valuable than it is, because of too much masculine energy. And so what's happening overall now is we have to have balance. And the more sort of sophisticated and forward thinking organizations and businesses are trying to do things in new ways. There's a business structure now called the B Corporation. In order to qualify as a B Corporation, you have to meet certain standards with how you treat your employees and staff, and how you relate with environmental standards. So there is, a more forward-thinking idea now about how we can do business. And certainly in the coaching circles, there's a lot of talk on, how we market and how we engage our clients, and doing that in a way that includes feminine energy, so that it's a balance, so that it's not just so far on that, what is the return on our investment in the next quarter.
So we're talking about groups coming maybe to Phantom History House or whatever, and doing getting together, using the Voyager Tarot or Tarot cards with someone like yourself, sort of guiding that thing as a sort of team building, as a way of group building, getting more, being vulnerable and engaging with your friends or your family. So let's use a couple of examples. So let's say we had sets of mother-daughter pairs that were here for a weekend, and you were going to sit down with them. Is there a certain way that you imagine? I'm just asking hypotheticals just because I think it's interesting. Is there a certain way that you would engage sets of mother-daughter pairs, as an example?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. So, as I shared with you, I had something happen spontaneously in an Intro to Voyager class, like with mother daughters. And it was kind of like, wow, sort of like what happened with the girls. One of the mother daughter pairs had a history of challenge, which a lot of times the mother daughter relationships can be a challenge. It can be a challenging relationship. But when they put those cards down, I don't even remember what questions I had them ask, the deck. They just cracked up because the cards had it so down. And they were, when you're able to see something that's been sort of hidden or on the down low, or you don't want to deal with it, or it's uncomfortable, and you just see it out there in the cards, it somehow loses some of its power over you. You're just like, oh, yep, there it is, black and white, ABC 1, 2, 3. Okay. And they laughed. I mean, it made these two just laugh. So, obviously that was healing, having the experience of that. And then the other two women, a mother-daughter pair, were planning to move out west together. And there was a lot of details to figure out. And one of them was way into the woo, and the other one had made her first life decision in the woo zone. And they were able, I structured some questions for them about the move. Like, a lot of times we don't always know what our resources are. So asking about our resources is always a good question when you're going into something unknown or unfamiliar. What hidden resources might there be that I could bring to this? That's a good question in almost any situation, because we're not always aware of what our hidden resources are. And so the card showed that they were going to meet some challenges in this move, and there might be some delays, but overall it was a good idea. So, often the cards will validate or confirm things that you kind of already know internally, but then it just feels good to see it in black and white, so to speak, or in living color.
I love it. Well, I like this idea of this being something like we're always trying to figure out how can we make what we're doing here at Phantom History House even more helpful and nourishing and wonderful and fun and whatever it can possibly be. And I love the idea of this sort of group dynamic, using the tarot card and the psychic medium's guidance as a way to sort of have a really cool experience. I do think if people know each other, that's probably very, very helpful. But I think it's a very cool thing. So
a group I'm thinking of, Tim, that often gets underserved are family businesses. Family businesses can be really challenging because you've got both the dynamics of the family things and the work things. And a lot of times family businesses don't have giant training budgets, so they're not hiring big, high-end corporate, consultants to come in and work with those dynamics. But this could be something really good for small and medium-sized businesses and family-owned businesses. And I have worked in family-owned businesses, so I know a little bit about that myself firsthand.
I think we can relate to that, running a business and being...
We're a family.
We're a family business. So, yeah, finding that line is very challenging.
Yeah, it can be.
A lot of times you have to straddle that line, and that's its own job. So I think that's really
I do love the idea of that being one of the potential groups.
Yeah.
This is so interesting to me, Kristin, and I love the idea of sort of the use of the cards in the environment that you created all of this, sort of taking some things away and making possible some conversations or some realizations or some discoveries. I think that's really wonderful.
It's a way of having some conversations that maybe need to be had that are just kind of not getting done, with some levity. Okay, it's often fun or funny, or it's sort of like with a wink and a nod when you see things. And I'm very non-judgmental, as you know. That's one of the main things that you are trained in as a seer, reader, helper. But way even before that. So, whatever comes out of that bowl, oh, there's the anger card. Okay. What's that about? No big deal.
Mhm.
And, we all have emotions. Some are pleasant, some are uncomfortable. But I've actually learned to see some of the uncomfortable feelings in a different way through the use of the Voyager. The confusion card, the anger card, and the negativity card, James shows kind of in a similar way. I didn't prepare this in advance. I don't know if I can find them fast enough, but they all have kind of like chunky, clunky, picture. They don't look pretty. Um, but the thing that's interesting about them all is it's like things are kind of not integrated. They're kind of falling apart. So that tells me when the picture's not all glued together, it's because things need to shift or change or evolve. And so now, if I'm feeling negative or confused or angry, it's because something needs to shift or evolve or change into a new picture that can look harmonious and beautiful again. And so now I kind of see things, just differently. I just see it like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's just a sign that we're in a transitional phase here. And it maybe have to be like that for a while. It might not resolve in 5 minutes, but we'll just hang out and give it some space. And then after a bit, it's going to begin to shift, or I can sort of rest easy in knowing that these are transitional things. I don't have to have like a double reaction against the reality. And,
And I
and so
think that's
that's
a
of
life
course.
lesson too, that something doesn't happen right away. There's always transition from one thing to another. We may want something right away or think we want something right away. But as things fall into place, we realize, oh, it's not exactly what I thought I wanted, but this is a better deal.
Why exactly? A lot of times, and that's another thing too, like I was actually thinking about that today, is what do we believe about the nature of the universe? In some ways, like when we're working with cards, we a little bit have to trust something. And James Wanless says the cards don't lie, but the cards don't do. So you're going to get a take on reality. If you come with a pure heart, if you come with an open, real intention, you're not, just trying to see what happens. You have a real concern. The universe is going to present back with clarity. It's almost sort of like when you do a Google search. When you type in a good question, you get a good result. And when you're working with intuitive, tools, including cards, that's how it works. You want to formulate questions that are going to lead to rich answers. Often, like I would definitely discourage yes and no. I mean, if if you absolutely have to, you can do yes and no. But it's so much more useful to say, what is something about myself? What's a quality within myself that would help me get through this phase right now? That's so much more useful, then when is this going to be over? Which sometimes we do feel that way, but it's
Yeah.
not particularly a helpful question if you're not comfortable in this now moment.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that you just said that because that's really important to me. Is like, okay, what do I need to know right now, to go through this next part in the best way? What parts of myself do I need to lean on, or what help is going to, like, what creative ideas are going to come to me? I'm always waiting for the creative idea because I know there's always a solution. I love that. We need to start wrapping up this conversation. I could sit here and talk about this for, it's really, really interesting. Different group dynamics that a psychic medium with the tarot cards could really help to facilitate. So, Kristen, before we let you go, I don't want to put you on the spot. I think I put him on the spot, but sometimes when we're doing this kind of live thing with a psychic medium like yourself, they'll pull a card or a couple cards to sort of wrap things up. Is that appropriate?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I was going to offer to do that at any point.
In the
So
speaker's
let's think
bowl.
of something relevant. So you guys are going into the weekend. So the big Whoa weekend. So let's see what you need to know for the Whoa weekend.
I like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're getting
Hopefully.
one of the Just Do It cards. This is cute. Okay. So James has this little deck of cards. This is the new, it says to eat wholesome foods. The
Oh.
nutrition, get nutrition. This is the Just Do It deck, the white squirrel deck. So pack yourself some good snacks. Don't fall into bad, nutrition habits at these events. Pack yourself some nice snacks and don't eat junk all weekend because that will not serve you. Also, metaphysically, Nutritious means find things there that are good for your soul. Find things that make you feel good, nourish you, make you feel inspired. Look for the things that spark your joy, while you're at the event.
I love that.
I like that too.
That's wonderful.
So I
And
have a few little things I want to say before we wrap up. These are just tips for people working with groups. Okay, this is a thing I learned years ago with organizational development universe, because I've played around with that some. When groups are trying to form and work together, there's this little thing that's form, storm, norm, perform. And every time a group has a change, or somebody leaves, or somebody new comes, or there's a big challenge, that group is likely to go through form, storm, norm, perform. So the storm is a little trouble, blah, blah. Then you get in a routine, then you can actually work together. So that's a little tip for groups. And now another one is participation is the key to harmony. So when everybody puts their ideas in and is invested, that group is going to work better. Another tip is you have to be careful. People must be careful with bringing overly dominant personality into a group setting. So you may be dynamic and charming and fabulous and all of that, but it's important to leave space for others. And if you do get a dominant personality, that can suck the life out of the group. And there was one more thing I wanted to share. That is, sometimes when it's time for a group to change or shift, some of the people in the group will know that. They'll be like, oh, we have to do things differently because that thing we've been doing forever is not working. And they'll start doing new stuff. But because groups kind of have like a homeostasis that they like to hang out in, a routine, a groove or whatever, often then some of the group will try to shift it back. And so that can be stressful. Even this happens with ourselves. Sometimes when we try to initiate new changes, we'll do good for a while. And then some part of our own brain will be like, no, I want to go back to the old way. And so change is not like, oh, we're just all of a sudden going to be making this change. It's process, back to process again.
I love that. Thank you for that. Was such a great way to finish this up.
It was.
Really
and I was
helpful.
having flashbacks to, group projects in school and all of those things you pointed out. I'm like, oh, I've been there. I've worked with them.
Yeah.
And
all those storms before you get to the norms.
Exactly. And who actually does all the work? Absolutely.
Kristin, you're so wonderful. Thank you for sharing your expertise and talking with us tonight. I hope that people will be calling up at Phantom History. By the way, if you're watching this and you thought this was interesting and helpful, share it with somebody, as we would love for them to get this information too. And then have them call us at Phantom History in House and say, I want to bring a group. Because one of the things I think we're best set up for is when we've had a group book the house for the weekend and they sort of have their own getaway with their group. It's their own private, intimate space together. And it's really, the dynamic is wonderful in the house for that.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And we love having Kristin here to help facilitate that.
Yeah, so ask for Kristin to come do her group tarot thing. I think it'll be really, really interesting.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and I can create something customized, from if a few people in the group, the leaders of the group, speak to me, I can create a customized experience for them very easily that will, feel like it's appropriate for their particular aims at the time.
Love it. That is so fantastic. Well, thank you for talking with us tonight. Thank you for being part of our family at Phantom History House and sharing everything that you bring to the universe and to what we're doing here. We so appreciate that.
Yeah, we can't wait to see you again soon in person here at Phantom History House.
Thank you, Kristin. You were absolutely wonderful tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I love creating with you too.
Thank you.
We feel the same.
Thanks everybody for watching.
Okay. Peace and happy.